Hi everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here. I'm still trying to make a final push to get through the last few books left in my giant pile of 50-cent comic books I regrettably bought last year because I watched Diversity in Comics and said, I want to support a comic book shop. So that has meant a lot of negative reviews of some of these books. And the title for this video is The Living Corpse Exhumed, is the comic book that was left on the floor of my car for several months with a coffee spill on it, and I never cared enough to pick it up and actually read it. I finally picked it up and rescued it by putting some blank pieces of paper between the pages, so there's going to be some cover damage. There are a few positive things to say about this, but I gave up on this story after about 3 pages in. I stopped caring, but it has enough interesting pros and cons that I think it's worth talking about. And the pros are, I'm hopeful that this team could become sort of like a Hellboy style team where they've got this sort of edgy cartoon style and vibe to their work. It's cartoony, but it's also kind of cool and raw, but it can be improved. So on this cover, this is not a good cover, and I think their coloring decisions are contributing to this because they've got this sort of exaggerated cartoon style and this digital coloring on top of it, which is just accentuating how unrealistic and abstract the cartoon characters are compared to the realistic red lighting reflecting off of their guns. I think this would benefit from a more Frank Miller color style, where if you zoom out and look at this, okay, he's a strong black shape, but he's completely lost against the black wood. So I call it Batman Beyond coloring, where in Batman Beyond, lots of scenes they'd have really weird Technicolor stuff, but the main characters would always be a different color. So if the main characters were in blue light, everyone else would be in dull orange light, and it would cycle through that in all the party scenes, and they'd use that in the regular scenes too. So have the living corpse be black or a rich dark royal blue or something, and then have like a ghostly sick yellow behind him to pop him forward. Just have him be different than everything else. Have these guys pop a little bit from the background, but have a similar color. So if this is kind of grayish purple, they're a brighter purple, and don't have these gradient effects on their faces because we need to read their lines and understand them as simple shapes and ideas. It's Samurai Jack-ish. So then you flip in, and let's see here. Written by Ken Hazer, art and story by Ken Hazer and Buzz Hassan. I was actually more interested in a lot of the ads from this one than the story and the art, because I see the potential for the I don't know how they're dividing the duties, but the Ken Hazer Buzz Hassan team, however they combine the work. So this is kind of cool, right? He's an ugly, gross zombie character, but he's got this kind of cool, craggy, tough guy look, and they're doing some cool stuff. Like, he's ready to rumble. They've got all sorts of guns and weapons trained on him. But problem number one is way too much flatness. Everything's a straight profile, straight on view. Even if there's running and jumping around, there aren't that many dynamic angles. And I've actually just kind of recently recognized that this is something I do, because it's easy to draw this way and just use the head measurements to figure it out. Whenever I put someone in sharp foreshortening, I don't know all the mathematical rules to get that exactly right, so I usually just eyeball it. Until you can spend the time to learn all that stuff, just try to eyeball some of it, and even if it's a little wonky, hold it sideways, hold it upside down, add a little bit of variety to these compositions. And then there's just a few lazy moments. They'll have stained glass windows and they'll write the words in of what's supposed to be in the stained glass windows. Here's a really good example. Profile, profile, profile. 3/4 view. Some blurred effect making it hard to read this art. Pretty much straight on view. So even though this is a dynamic scene, that's a 2-page spread, and they've put it at a Dutch angle to give it kind of the illusion of it being a bit more of a strange angle. This is pretty much a straight-on view of this whole church scene. And overall, kind of very dull, flat color, which doesn't lend itself to the cartoony rough. It's not Samurai Jack, because Samurai Jack doesn't have that hard line style, and it's not Frank Miller, because Frank Miller had a much rougher drawing style with a lot more emphasis on compositions. But it does remind me of kind of maybe this sort of subgroup of artists I've seen. Oh, I forget the artist. There was an artist for The Amazing Spider-Man in the 2000s who had kind of a exaggerated cartoony style, but it was also kind of rough and, feisty too. It's a good style to watch people beating each other up. with. I kind of checked out at about this point because this was when I realized that this living corpse character was kind of this murderous, edgy dude who he regrets killing his family, but then he also kills these FBI agents. Here's another straight-on shot that isn't that dynamic or interesting. Okay, there's kind of a cool ninja girl, and they convey the expression of fear and sadness in her pretty well. But this is about the point where I said, okay, I don't want to read the words anymore, but I like the art enough that I kept reading at this point. And I just started seeing all these crazy ads from these Dynamite books. Okay, Kirby Genesis Dragon's Bane, published by Dynamite. What is this? Is this like yet another crazy universe that Jack Kirby invented that Dynamite has picked up? What? I'll go check that out. I mean, those are clearly Kirby-esque designs. Is this just an homage, or are they continuing some really obscure thing Kirby did in the 40s? Okay. Oh, live comic cover critique. So the Diversity in Comics channel has roasted Alex Ross. I like Alex Ross, but I'm starting to see a lot of sameness in his paintings, where every painting, it's the same style, it's the same presentation, it's the same technique, and he doesn't treat superheroes any different than he treats cowboys. So if I were picking up a cover, this cover would win because it's doing a really original bit, even though I think there's a couple ways where this cover has been done weekly. So it's Alex Ross, and this one is the Francavilla cover. All right, so the bit is Lone Ranger on his horse in the front, and then his profile in the back, and they're kind of blending together. This is a much better horse drawing than the one I roasted from Alex Maleev for infamous Iron Man 12, where at first I thought it was kind of a cool Renaissance drawing, but then I realized there were all these dumb mistakes that had unfortunate implications, like the horse's tail coming out of the wrong part of its rear end, its flank. Thank you, degenerate My Little Pony fans, for teaching me the proper terminology for a horse's rear end with your disgusting memes. So the horse's flank is sort of doubling as the Lone Ranger's cheekbone here, but it's pressed in on his mouth, and it's floating in front of his face rather than kind of blending into his face. So I would have bumped the horse this way or bumped his face to the left to try to get the horse's flank to perfectly line up with his jawline. And then even down here, this is really well done. Sort of the shadow behind the horse becoming sketchy and becoming the shadow of his jaw. A strong masculine man has very prominent cheekbones, and you can kind of emphasize this, with whiskers or with a shadow along their jawline to make that more prominent. Was it Dickens? I don't remember what author I'm thinking of who would always describe the character's cheekbones. Maybe it was the Scarlet Pimpernel, I think, made a point of describing the shape of his cheekbones really well. Okay, so then his hat also doubles as clouds in the sky behind the Lone Ranger. This is a little bit of like 4-year-old kid doing a fluffy cloud drawing style of clouds. I'd have preferred if there was a bit more wispiness to the line and it related to the shape of the hat. And then the grass underneath the horse sort of resolves in this shadow along his shoulder. So what I like about this cover is it's an interesting concept. Two views of the Lone Ranger merged together. It's pretty well executed where things read separately and read together nicely. But especially here where the horse's flank is right up against his mouth, it makes it a little bit awkward. But I still give it props for trying something that cool, and some props for how well it was executed. So back to the living corpse. Here's a weak drawing, and he's got a shovel and he chops off a bunch of heads and smashes a bunch of heads together. Another straight profile view, another straight on view, another profile view, another straight on view. There's a little bit of a cool 3/4 angle, but compensates for it by zooming in on his face so you don't see the rest of his body in profile. In a 3/4 view, profile view. Yeah, bird's eye view in this panel, but still pretty straight on. So I guess, props for this, for at least including a bird's eye view. But even when it's a bird's eye view, it's not the most interesting look at the character. He's walking with a shovel over his head. I'm kind of interested to check this out just because. I mean, I've probably mentioned How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way in about 20 videos. That was so influential on me, and it might be worth just seeing what some of the art is from the comics legends included in it. I really love the very first Tarzan novel, and I didn't care for any of the Tarzan sequels after that. And I like the Disney adaptation of Tarzan 2, but the character of Tarzan is so fascinating because he's such a fantasy character. He finds his parents' books and he teaches himself to read out in the jungle. That's nuts, but it's a really fascinating concept. Like, if you were a brilliant man out in the savages and, you know, uneducated and untrained, could you do something like that? Could you civilize yourself? I don't know. So I mean, that might be worth checking out just to see how they tackle the subject. Burroughs, by the way, is the same author as John Carter of Mars, and a lot of his works are in the public domain. Diversity in Comics has praised him. You see a lot of interesting adaptations of his work because much of his stuff has entered the public domain. More profile views, you know, kind of a cool monster. I was not reading a word of this by this time, but I was like saying, oh, wow, cool monster, and he's got a giant fist, and he's picking him up, but straight on view. That's a 3/4 view, but it's just, come on, push it. I'm rooting for you. I kind of dig this sort of craggy, cartoony style, but just not immersive, not engaging. I always used to imagine Tarkas as a bit more slender than this. I think that it's actually mentioned in the books that they kind of have a slender build because of the gravity of Mars, I think. But I love Tarkas, so I'd be interested in checking out what they're doing with him. I'm not big on this painting style, but whatever, I'd give it a shot. The Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, is that a real thing? Help me out, Weebs. Is Bodai 2 real, or did they just make that up because they wanted like a faux lolly manga example or something? The sun shows up and it's so edgy, they got him torn up and he's in profile view again, and then they got a few interesting fan art bits, and yeah, so these are the two covers. Cover A by the normal team, alternate cover, movie cover. Who did that? Who did the alternate cover? Hold on a second. Let's go check the credits because I want to see this if I'm going to talk about the covers. Color assists. Cover A. Okay, cover B by Movie Image courtesy of Shoreline Entertainment. So this is based on some kind of movie. Okay. Oh, that's horrible. Yeah, it's just some CGI concept art they did or something that they just slapped on a cover. Like PS2 graphics. So this wins. I don't know. Something about this feels phoned in. SEAL Team 6 by Chuck Dixon. I'll check that out after that great live stream he did with EVS. I was already kind of a Chuck Dixon fan without even knowing I was a Chuck Dixon fan because I read a lot of his comics as a kid before I was paying attention to who was actually making them. And Vampirella. Yeah, she looks great. That's what the character of Vampirella is. Just purely a tease. So can't recommend. But what I did like about this is I saw enough potential that the Hazer and Hassan style could be good in the future. Right, but right now it's pretty roast worthy. So I'm #1 Marmaduke fan. I am almost through this 50-cent pile. I'm going to have to do something special to celebrate when I get through it. Like, never ever buy a giant pile of 50-cent books again. Marmaduke giveaway spectacular. I love you guys. Why don't you like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications to receive notices of future videos that I do. And I'll catch you later.